away with your ban. So Blitz has said he's got Warrior, Rogue, and Shaman after the ban. We don't know what his banned deck was, but by the sounds of Warrior, Rogue, and Shaman, I would say that Blitz also has an aggro lineup. So maybe we'll see.
Does that mean we're going to see a Pirate Warrior? Yeah, that's exciting.
It looks like we've got the spectate button up, so let's go on and have a look there.
Right.
And what I'm curious about, is it a Pirate Warrior that has admitted all the 2-mana cards so that they can play Prince Kaliseth? Who knew that nerfing Fiery War Axe was actually a buff? Because now you can Prince Kaliseth.
Yeah.
So Blitz has queued his warrior first, and it is indeed a Pirate Warrior, and looks like Mochii has queued his Rogue. Very interesting. I'm seeing in Mochi's hand a Backstab, a Shadowcaster, and a Sprint. That tells me that we're maybe looking at a Miracle Rogue, or at least perhaps a Tempo Rogue, the Shadowcaster at least, and maybe a Sprint as a late-game refill if needed. Unfortunately, I think if that's the approach that Mochi's taking, and I suspect he's throwing keeping the backstab and throwing those other two away, that Blitz's Pirate Warrior is going to be a problem for him. Now, Blitz has mulliganed several cards and been rewarded by getting patches back, and a Vicious Fledgling to go with the South Sea Captain, and the upgrade, and the first card he drew was a Bloodsail Cultist. So how Blitz structures these early turns is going to be interesting. I think the Vicious Fledgling is something he's going to want to get in play and protect. So instead of playing the patches turn 1, he's played the upgrade, because that'll allow him to try and pick off opposing pirates that come out to try and protect that Vicious Fledgling. Mochii did nothing on turn 1 and daggered up on turn 2, the traditional rogue play.
Yep.
And I'm thinking what we see is what Mochii got back from his mulligan. So he's still got the Sprint and the Shadowcaster in hand, has drawn a second Shadowcaster and a Vilespine Slayer. So Mochi's draw is pretty slow and is going to have to lean on that backstab pretty heavily to stave off Blitz's aggressive opening. What Blitz does on turn 2, though, we're just going to have to see. I'm not seeing any 2-mana cards. I'm guessing there's a Prince Kaliseth in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're correct. Absolutely, and even having the Fireflies here behind with the upgraded weapon, it's actually quite strong early on, considering how slow Mochi's hand is. We see him pick up an Assassinate as well, and you're kind of trying to wonder if this rogue is just directed towards the late game rather than your conventional tempo rogue, just trying to fire out nice and early and close the game nice and early. I'm interested to see what the rest of this deck entails.
I think this is more of a Miracle Rogue list. In other words, it is and traditionally Miracle Rogue list leverages its card drawing off a Gadget and Auctioneer. I suspect instead Mochii is going for a prep sprint approach instead. The Assassinate's interesting. Obviously, Vilespine Slayer is better than Assassinate, but I guess when you want more than 2 Vilespine Slayers, then you can bring in Assassinate. So what we see here from Blitz on his third turn is the South Sea Deckhand, then a coin Bloodsail Cultist that turns the Rusty Hook into a 2/4 weapon. And now we see the South Sea Deckhand and the 2 elementals going face, and I'm guessing the weapon going face as well. It does, to put Mochii down to 24. Mochi's slow start is shining clear here, and Blitz is smelling blood and going in for the kill.
Yeah, and we see Mochii pick up a Loot Hoarder, and he's contending with 2 big problems here. One is that the board is starting to spiral out of control, but number 2 is that a significant amount of damage is going to come in from Blitz's weapon as well. So if you're Blitz right now, you're pretty much thinking you have all bases covered and you're in pretty good stead moving forward. Though Mochii does have some fight next turn in the form of Backstab Vilespine Slayer, so he chooses to try and recover some of that tempo. These are going to be the next turns, 4, 5, 6 are really going to determine who walks away with this game and whether Blitz is really going to be put up to a fight or whether he's just going to walk through.
Absolutely. And what's interesting here, of course, is what Blitz needs to do is reduce Mochii to 0 health. And Rogue is not particularly... Hello. Mochi's just drawn in Zoth the Corruptor and had a Vanish last turn as well. So we know what Mochi's plan is to go very late in the game. And Blitz's plan, of course, is to not go very late in the game. What Mochii did this turn was a backstab on the Vicious Fledgling and then finished it off with the dagger, and Vilespine Slayer taking out the Bloodsail Cultist, leaving Blitz with just a couple of 1/2 elementals. But Mochii is on 14 health, so at this point Blitz has just got to figure out how to get in all that damage and close it off before Mochii can really stall the ball out with Shadowcasters and Zoth and things like that. I suspect next turn, as long as that Vilespine Slayer is still in play, that Mochii is just going to Shadowcaster the Vilespine Slayer, play a second copy as a 1/1, and just try and keep Blitz off minions on the board. The question is whether he has enough health to get away with this in the long run, and I'm not entirely sure he does.
Yeah, and it's a novel strategy from Mochii, and it's nice to see something different every once in a while. But the biggest problem that this kind of deck will face, especially being rogue, is the lack of generic healing that the class has access to, and we're just seeing this very problem here where the deck just has no recovery mechanism for when things slip out of control early in the game. And surprise, surprise, Pyro Warrior is the best at making things slip out of control for people in the early game. So it's just a bit of a nightmare matchup for Mochii. So it'll be interesting to see what this deck can do later on in the series against a slower deck, perhaps.
Absolutely. And as suspected, Mochii did get away with doing the Shadowcaster Vastbine's Slayer play. That took out the Bloodsail Cultist and the Dread Corsair that Blitz had put into play. But Blitz, of course, has already attacked Mochii down to 10, still has another 2 attack of his weapon. He's getting a lot of damage, and he's also drawn N'Zoth's First Mate, which is going to get some extra chip damage. At this point, Mochii needs taunts and healing, and it doesn't look like he's getting them. And I don't know that Mochii's going to be able to attack back for enough to defend. But it's not over yet. We'll soon see if this pans out for Mochii or for Blitz.
Yeah, you have to be leaning towards Blitz at this point, but you're right in saying it's not over. And if the Rogue can't pick up a win here, I worry because, as I think you've correctly identified, that this is a very aggressive lineup, and it's just, you wonder when the Rogue is going to have a chance to breathe and really get into the mid-game so they can start doing crazy things with Shadowcasters, Death Rattles, Sprints, all that kind of stuff. I think Blitz may have just been, the wrong opponent to have this lineup against.
Yeah, I think so too. Similar to what we saw last round with Mr. Lego, having an anti-aggro lineup and queuing into something that's not really targeted against you. Same thing here. It looks like maybe Mochii has a bit of an anti-control lineup, and he's queued into an aggro lineup, and that's going to cost him. We've got Patches coming down. We've got N'Zoth's First Mate coming down. Mochii's down to 8 life. He's seeing a lot of minions on the opposite board, and he hasn't got a way of clearing them all outside of Vanish. And vanishing things like N'Zoth's First Mate and Patches, it's not really going to slow them down.
No, and that's interesting here. It's interesting that Blitz has kind of run out of steam a little bit as well in closing out this game as well. Just a significant lack of really big weapon damage coming in. We just saw, an upgrade and a Rusty Hook as well. So it has given Mochii some room to breathe. But again, you just got to wonder when the Arcanite Reapers are going to come down, Leroy, all that kind of stuff to just close proceedings.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And Mochii has stabilized at 7 life. There are no minions on Blitz's board right now. Blitz has drawn a Kor'kron Elite off the top. Looked like he maybe considered attacking something other than face, but then effectively said, lol, just kidding. Went face to attack Mochii to 3, Rusty Hook, then attacked him to 2. There are 2 charges left of that Rusty Hook, which is just enough. And I think Mochii's not really going to be able to recover from that very easily. Even if he can vanish and keep every single minion of Blitz's off the board, that Rusty Hook will finish it. And as you said, an Arcanite Reaper in the next few turns will have done the same thing. Another Kor'kron Elite off the top, Leroy Jenkins. There are a lot of options for Blitz to close out this game.
Yeah, you can't help but think, and it may be in there, but things like Tark Reaper may help this Rogue deck actually be able to sometimes climb out of the deep hole that these matchups can send them down. Things like Sprint, Vanish, N'Zoth, they're very value-oriented late-game cards. To wonder when deck building like that, where you're going to strike the balance, or whether in this kind of tournament setting you are just going to try and outvalue control decks in particular, and just, if I verse aggro, it is what it is, and just win all the control matchups. So it could be a meta call, might be some interesting deck building. I think we need to see a lot more of it though.
Absolutely, I agree that unfortunately Mochii was put in the corner there where he was targeting something other than what he faced, and he hung on for dear life at best he could, but Blitz, of course, drew the Arcanite Reaper off the top, so he didn't even need to wait 2 turns to poke him to death with the Rusty Hook. He could do it with an Arcanite Reaper upside the face.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Blitz cues in next, especially knowing what he's seen. He was probably a little bit confused at the start of that game. Definitely not what he was expecting, that's for sure.
No, that's right. Exactly. It'll be interesting to see now that we know that Mochii's Rogue is targeting control decks. What are the rest of his decks targeting? And we know that Blitz's approach is, in fact, by his namesake, it is a Blitz approach. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
got some fun things going on in the background there. So
yeah,
you see that Mochii is choosing to queue up his priest, and it does seem to be a Razakis priest, Singleton priest, Highlander strategy, and Blitz, of course, with his shaman there. I don't have access to Blitz's hand right now, but I believe it would be a token evolved shaman as well. So I actually had a look at the matchup stats for this on the Data Reaper yesterday, and if I remember correctly, I think the priest is 4% the favorite, which I find interesting.
That's a nice number, and it's one of those things where even when a deck is favored, that doesn't mean 100% favored. And I certainly watched Amnesiac practicing with Purple earlier today on stream, and Amnesiac was playing the Kazakhs Priest, and Purple was still managing to close out the games each time. So it's certainly 4% advantage does not mean wins every time. We see Blitz coming out early with the Bloodsail Corsair into patches. He's still got 2 Evolves in hand and a Doppelgangster and a Thrall Deathseer. So he's looking to put a lot of minions on the board nice and big in probably one turn. And the question is going to be whether Mochii can sort of stymie that attack with his board clears. He has a Shadow Word Horror in hand, which is very good against the early totems and things that Blitz will put out. If Blitz was going to go Doppelgangster next turn Thrall, the Shadow Word Horror would be good against that, but I suspect Blitz is going to play Doppelgangster and Evolve in the same turn to make that a little more difficult, and then we'll use Thrall and or the second Evolve the following turn to make the minions even harder to deal with.
Yeah,
however,
right. Yeah.
Mochii, of course, has come out nice and early with not only the Radiant Elemental, but a Cabal Talon Priest buffing the Radiant Elemental, so that he's going to try and keep the minions off the board, I guess hoping to get control of the board before Blitz can come back with a Doppelgangster Evolve combination.
Yeah, I mean, the priest is off to a blistering start there, no pun intended for you. And it's some interesting text in the deck. I know Cabal Talon Priest is making a comeback in some of the lists, and I'm sure your infographic will show that. Cabal Courier, though, I find interesting. What do you make of that in the deck?
There have been a few people who played Cabal Courier. As I said at the start of the stream, I'm currently building a Kazakhs Priest infographic. I did one about a month and a half ago as the format started, and now we're seeing things solidify. I thought I'd do one again. Of the 41 unique lists that I gathered for the latest infographic, only 2 of them have Cabal Courier. It is a unique card that can do interesting things, and sometimes when you're playing a deck of one-ofs, you can afford to fit something like this in to try and get something interesting. So we see here for the Cabal Courier, Potion of Polymorph, Embrace the Shadow, and Cabal Trafficker. I don't really know how much those are great options. Actually, you know what? The Potion of Polymorph could have been really good against the Doppelgangster Evolve combo. But of course, Mochii did not take that, not seeing that coming. Maybe he's thinking, I just need to get things like Shadow Word Horror along with Pint-Sized Potion and or Dragonfire Potion to deal with that kind of board. Unfortunately, Blitz right now is going for the Doppelgangster Coin Evolve turn by the looks of things. We just have to see what the random number generation rolls up here. We see 3 Doppelgangsters, we see an Evolve, we see purple dust everywhere.
Whoa, that's a decent Evolve.
The Beast, the Nerubian Prophet, and a Scaled Nightmare. Now that Scaled Nightmare could get out of hand. I suspect Mochii's going to use his Shadow Word Horror on that. The 4/4 Nerubian Prophet may look underwhelming for a 6-mana minion, but 4 attack is generally very good against Priest. And the Beast being a 9/7, well, if you can take that down, you get your own 3/3. So we'll see how we're going. Looks like Mochii is considering playing Raza the Chained, which I don't know about that. I think if you're playing Raza the Chained, you want to take out that Scalebane.
That will open him up to a lot of damage.
It will open him up to a great deal of damage. I mean, at this point, he can put 7 damage onto that 2/8 minion, and that's not enough to kill it. Which means it'll have 4 attack on his following turn, which is enough to kill him. So it looks like instead they're taking out the Nerubian Prophet. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I would have liked using the Shadow Word Horror to take out the Scaled Nightmare, but of course I guess it would have taken out the Radiant Elemental and the Cabal Courier as well. So maybe that's why he wanted to avoid it. But the Shadow Word Horror is now not very useful because the Scaled Nightmare is a 4/5 instead. Looks like the Beast is taking out Raza. Blitz has got a handful of cards. He's actually got a handful of cards that are weak to that Shadow Word Horror, but I suspect what Blitz is going to do here is just straight up throw Deathseer on the board. So he's going to put damage onto the Beast. The Beast will go down to like a 9/2, very fragile. It's probably about to trade with something else. and it looks like the Scaled Nightmare is eating one of the other 2 minions. But of course, playing Thrall will then evolve them even further, and they won't keep that damage. So it'll be a very effective play after cleaning up the board.
So what do you fancy, the Radiant Elemental trade there, or the Cabal Tongue trade? I think it was the correct trade, getting rid of the Radiant Elemental.
I absolutely agree.
Considering Lyra possibilities.
Exactly that, right? The Radiant Elemental has a lot of possibilities. Like keeping each spell cheaper by 1 means that if you get something like Lyra, or even a Gadget out in Auctioneer, we see that every now and again. Just leaving it in play is dangerous. Whereas the Cabal Talonpriest, while having more attack, does nothing else. So it's the least threatening of the two. Blitz then played Thrall Deathseer. He turned his beast into a Ragnaros Light Lord, and he turned the Scaled Nightmare into a Calamos Primal Lord. All of the lords. So he's got an 8/8 and a 7/7. I'd say this is pretty good for Blitz. What Mochii is probably hoping to draw would be Shadow Reaper Anduin. I don't see it in his hand yet, but that would be exactly the kind of card he would want to draw to clear out.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he doesn't see Anduin probably in the next turn, I think this game's going to go downhill for him very quickly.
Very, very quickly, I agree. In Mochii's hand, we see things like Bloodsail, Corsair, and Flame Tongue Totem, which he got from a Thoughtsteel. We can see the Cabal Trafficker, which he took off the Cabal Courier. It's just a 6/6. It's not big enough. We see a Doomsayer. That's not going to take anything down because they can just eat it. We see a Master Spell, which isn't going to do very much. We see Prophet Velen. Again, you want that after your combos online, not before. Mind Blast, same again. A Shadow Word Horror, which is now doing nothing. Yeah, I think things are not looking good for Mochii this game.
Yeah, and I think that's why Blitz was happy to leave the Razaka's Priest in the lineup. He's playing decks that tell the Priest, basically, I'm going to put X amount of pressure on you, and if you can't deal with it by a particular turn, then I'm going to run away with the game. Like, sure, if you draw the answers, there's not much I can do about that, but at least I can put enough pressure on you to try and end the game before you get rolling.
Exactly. And, sometimes putting all of your pressure on the table and saying, hey, have you got an answer? Their answer will be, yes, I do. But I think the odds are, a lot of the time, their answer is going to be, not just yet. Actually, can you give me a few more turns? And someone with the name Blitz is going to be like, yeah, nah.
And we see a main deck Mind Control picked up there for Mochii. Perhaps with the Cabal Courier, the Mind Control, perhaps maybe directed towards doing a bit better in the mirror, though. I mean, that means some cycle cards may have had to have come out of the deck. So what do you make of that deck building choice?
I absolutely agree that means he's trying to target more controlling matchups. And seeing his rogue deck, I'd say that's consistent. I don't know that I would run Mind Control myself personally. I mean, as we saw earlier with the previous match, when the Razaka's Priest deck gets going, it wants to play a lot of cards in one turn. And 10 mana means you're playing one card in a turn. That's it. Your opponent plays a giant minion like one of the ones that we see here from Blitz, then maybe Mind Control is the kind of thing you want to land. Of course, Mochii is still 2 mana away from being able to Mind Control, for example, that Ragnaros Light Lord. I don't think he's going to get there on time. Unfortunately, Blitz is just being too fast for Mochii's more slowly targeted deck.
So if you're Blitz, yeah, considering everything that's going on, a lot of considerations given the board, the Flame Tongue making the Cabal Trafficker an 8/6, all kinds of things, or are you just directing 16 damage up top? What do you think would be the best line of play here?
I really do like 16 damage up top. They are able to trade back with that Cabal Trafficker. But, Kazakus Priest can't run Reno Jackson, so it can't heal very quickly. The closest thing they have to healing is Greater Healing Potion, and you've got to take most of your turn off to do that. I like this play even better, though. Alex Strasser took out the Flame Tongue Totem, and then Ragnaros the Light Lord went face, putting Mochii to 14. He then played a Firefly and a Manatai Totem and a Thing from Below, and then ran out of time to use his hero power, or maybe just didn't want to use his hero power to upgrade something. Yep, a grave mistake, says Thrall, so it sounds like a whoops, he ran out of time.
Well, maybe the Firefly would have been a Doomsayer, who knows?
Or he could. That's right, he could have been playing it safe. But I like this. It's a big board. He's both put pressure on his opponent and also prevented that Cabal Trafficker from trading with one of his 8/8s by taking out the Flame Tongue Totem. It looks like Moshii's just trying to have to dig for something with Kazakus, but he's chosen 5 because he's going to have 5 mana left. That's an appropriate amount for the potion. He's looking at summoning a 5/5 demon, adding 2 random demons to your hand, or drawing 2 cards. Looks like I think he went with drawing 2 cards. Freeze 2 enemy minions, gain 7 armor, or add 2 random demons to your hand. It looks like that Kazakus's potionry is just not panning out how he would hope. honestly, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see a 5-mana potion that was going to dig him out of this anyway. So it was probably all over. I like Blitz's approach here. Make sure that Mochii can't trade back easily with the Cabal Trafficker while applying a lot of pressure, and the game will soon be his.
Yeah, I think he struck a really nice balance between maintaining his board and making the opponent have the answer while still doing significant damage to the face. Seems like a good balanced strategy.
Exactly, and the potion was freeze 2 enemy minions, which froze a Manatide Totem and Ragnaros, i.e. not the ones you want, and drew him a Holy Nova, and looks like Shadow Reaper Anduin, which is the kind of thing he wants facing down Alexstrasza and Ragnaros Lightlord, but it might still be a turn too late. Alexstrasza is able to attack. Alexstrasza could attack down the Cabal Trafficker, the 6/3, or it could attack the 2/3 Gnomish Inventor, or it could attack Kazgus, but I see 14 health that looks like it should turn into 6 health. What else we got here? We've got a Flame Tongue Totem. We can make him 4 health. That would be nice. It looks like Mochii's going to have to play Anduin next turn, and it's just not going to be enough, I would say. I think the approach that Blitz probably wants to take this turn, putting the pressure on Mochii, putting a bunch of stuff on the board that would survive either Anduin or a Dragonfire Potion. Because Dragonfire Potion can take out the smaller minions, Anduin can take out the bigger minions. You can't play both of them. One half of that equation is still going to be there to close out the deal on the following turn. Still, we're seeing Blitz's rope here. He's giving it a lot of consideration. I think maybe you want to give it faster consideration.
Yeah, maybe a little too much consideration, or his internet's giving him some consideration. No, that's Primal Fin there.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't have NBN. So we see Alex going face to put him to 6. We see a Flame Elemental and a Primal Fin Totem. And he's out of time. He didn't Hero Power, maybe. Yep, no, he didn't Hero Power.
I think that is possibly more a product of internet or connection issues or something akin to those lines. I don't think a player of Blitz's caliber would be floating 6 mana there, for example.
No, not with a hand full of so many things, no. So it's fine. Mochii is on 6 health. He's trying to clean up some of the smaller minions on Blitz's board. He's healing himself, and he's playing Shadow Reaper Anduin, put himself up to 8 and then 13. That takes out the 2 big minions. This may be the turnaround we were looking for. I think Blitz not spending much mana that turn was not terrific for him. One thing of note, of course, is that Blitz is still holding an Evolve and a Doppelgangster. So he could, this turn, play Doppelgangster and Evolve and Jade Claws, and then still have his Hero Power to upgrade anything further. Maybe Mochii saw this coming and has just played a Doomsayer. So he's played a Doomsayer into an empty board saying, you can refill if you like.
Yeah, I really like the recognition from Mochii there that playing the Doomsayer proactively just to make sure Blitz cannot reapply game-ending pressure, and then that gives Mochii another chance to use things like Holy Nova to heal up, do some chip damage with his Hero Power, and just work towards that Mind Blast Prophet Velen combination in trying to close out the game. So I like the line from Mochii, and it'll be interesting to see what Blitz comes back with.
Well, looking at this, we have Prophet Velen in hand and Mind Blast and a Bloodsail Corsair. So that means Mochii can start his turn with 2 damage to the face, then 4 damage, and then 10 damage, and then 4 damage, and then 4 damage. That's a lot of damage. I think it's about 24, if not 28. That could be enough. I mean, Blitz is on 30, but it could be a lot. So here we go. Blitz is Jade Lightninging the Doomsayer, playing the Jade Claws, and a Maelstrom Portal. So he's not willing to let Mochii start the turn with Blitz having nothing on the board. 2 Maelstrom Portals, just getting something extra on the board. That's leaving Mochii with just a 3/1 Kazgus to Blitz's 2/2 Jade Golem, 3/3 Jade Golem.
Oh, that's a huge pickup.
And a Bloodsail Corsair. What did he pick up? Oh, yeah,
he's
another
picked
card.
up a Wild Pyromancer to combine with the Holy Nova. So this will do 2 things. We can ensure the board can be totally cleared unequivocally, and we can also ensure that next turn we have enough damage with the Prophet Velen and the Mind Blast to close out the game. So it's looking fantastic here.
I'm not sure, but he may.
Perhaps this is
he's cleared the board with Shadowwood Horror and Hero Powers instead. But that Wild Pyromancer maybe is, as you say, close to lethal, if not lethal, that turn. And he's just running out the Wild Pyromancer and the Bloodsail Corsair, which finishes off the Jade Claws, of course, and allows him to Hero Power Blitz again down to 23. He's considering playing the Unlicensed Apothecary. I'm not so sure about that.
Not sure if that's a good idea.
Yeah. When you're on
lethal.
And especially when you're wanting to play Prophet Velen next turn, you don't want to find yourself unable to play Prophet Velen.
Yeah. Wise decision there, holds back on it, passes off, and figures he has enough to close out this game. So, I mean, perhaps the only criticism of Blitz here is that he's taken too careful consideration of planning out his turns and his mana, or maybe had some connection issues. He's been going to the rope a lot and then having to panic make some decisions in the last 5 seconds of the turn, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is the culprit there might well be the dreaded NBN we were talking about earlier, or lack of, unfortunately. We're seeing the Doppelgangster and the Evolve. I'm guessing at this point, Blitz is hoping to get a couple of great charge minions. I see no charge minions. I see a 5/5 taunt, a 5/5 without taunt, and a 3/6 taunt. Looks like he's going to reroll one of those with his hero power. Or he's not. But I would say...
You've got to wonder what he's considering here. You'd think you'd need to do something. You need to change the course of this game.
You need to do 13 to the face or gain a lot of life. And unfortunately, he's not going to be able to do either of those things, I think. Next turn, we're going to see 2 to the face the hero power, then Velen, then 4, then 10 and another 4. Yeah, that's just 20. He re-rolled and got a Baron Geddon, which cleared out Mochii's board, but unfortunately dropped Blitz down to 21. It's going to matter to see whether Mochii can sequence this turn correctly. He's mousing over Velen and Mind Blast. You want to actually play the cards in your hand first. I've got a funny feeling that he doesn't have lethal. As I said, I think
he's played the Corsair the previous turn.
He's got 20 damage, and if he'd kept the Corsair, even though I think he was playing the Corsair so that he took out the Jade Claws. Maybe he was scared of the damage. But yes, playing that Corsair last turn meant that he is 1 damage off. It's not great for Mochii, and I think Mochii is counting that up right now and going,
Yeah, and that's really interesting to see, considering that he did have Holy Nova options to him last turn. He perhaps should have thought to ensure the lethal for this turn in case Blitz was able to refill the board and come back with a Bloodlust lethal or something to that effect. So
it looks like he's Holy Nova'd the 5/5, which had already taken 2. He hero powered, then he's Holy Nova'd, and he's hero powering it again to finish Geddon, and then he's had to play out Unlicensed Apothecary just to get enough hero activations in to clear Blitz down to just a 3/2. This is something else. Looks like Blitz is playing Eye of Blackpaw. This could be very dangerous for Mochii. Who knew that playing out that Bloodsoul Corsair with a weapon in play, like you wanted to kill that opposing weapon to prevent too much damage. I think maybe, I don't know who he was truly scared of. He had cleared his opponent's board. Maybe the J Claws wasn't going to be too much damage, but you know when you have a card in your hand that's lit up with the orange border because it's got something at the head, man, I'm
you just
playing
got to play it.
But apparently not.
It's interesting. I mean, if he played Unlicensed Apothecary at that turn, we were discussing it too, he would have just played Velen, wouldn't have burnt himself out. That could have been another route to lethal. Holding onto the Bloodsail Corsair meant he wouldn't have died if he didn't take away the weapon charge, and B would have had lethal the following turn. So definitely some different decisions could have been made.
Yeah. Looks like Blitz has tried to reroll the Jade Golem with his hero power and got an Ally Armorsmith, which would technically be good if it was going to get in combat with anything. But I suspect it's not going to get in combat with anything. Mochii is now pointing 2 damage at Thrall's face. Understandable. Then he's playing Velen, which will allow him now to point 4 damage at Thrall's face. Put him at 13.
I believe it'll be 1 damage over lethal with this.
It certainly is. That's right. The fact that last turn Thrall was at 21 and he was 1 damage off. This turn Thrall was on 19 and therefore he was 1 damage ahead. So there we go. Mochii manages to finish this game off. Unfortunate. I think Blitz may be, as you say, getting plagued by internet errors, which is not terrific for everyone. But unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes.
Locked up for Blitz, and there was a turn where he's just floated 6 mana. Yeah, I think that's less a testament to his ability, more a testament to some NBN or, like you said, a lack thereof. So we go 1-1 in the series here, and again, I still can't help but be a little bit anxious about Mochii's Rogue deck and its place in taking a victory in this series. I'm not quite seeing, short of extraordinary draw, how it's going to take a win. Being Conquest format, you have to win with all of your decks. So
exactly.
I'm not sure what is going to happen here. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if I see Blitz re-queue his Shaman here, especially considering that he knows what type of rogue it is. The Shaman should be extremely powerful in that matchup, should this matchup be that as well. So we see the Paladin from Mochii here, and we see Blitz has re-queued his Shaman.
Yeah, I think your analysis is spot on there, Chilmy. That rogue deck is probably going to be Moshi's weak point in this set.
Yeah, and we do see a control esque looking Paladin. We see Acolyte of Pain, Wild Pyromancer, Lich King coming out from Mochii. So no Murlocs here. What do you make of this?
Well, it's interesting. When we saw that what Mochi's class choices were, we assumed he would be on Murloc Paladin, right? But of course, once we saw the Rogue deck, that meant that maybe this was a control Paladin list instead. I think this deck is actually pretty reasonable against the Shaman deck. Now, of course, there are going to be draws where the Shaman deck does get Doppelgangster Evolve, and the Paladin deck will not play Equality, Consecration, or Wild Pyromancer in Equality, and Blitz will just run away with the game. But I've got a funny feeling we're looking at a match where Mochii is going to have some good solid board clears to deal with the boards that Blitz can put out. And if you can deal with the boards that the Shaman puts out, then you're in a good spot to try and finish them off.
Yeah, it's hard to think what Mochii might be trying to achieve in this series. I can't help but think in some other control matchups that this Paladin deck might actually be quite weak, whereas it's more of an anti-aggro kind of strategy, like you said, will work really well against the Shaman. But then you contrast it with the Rogue deck, which seems to be completely geared towards beating control. So I'm not too sure what his lineup's out to achieve, but I do know it's trying to achieve something very specific and win particular matchups, which may or may not work out in his favor.
I think you're right. I think he's covering his bases. He thinks that the Rogue is going to be great against the control decks. Things like this Paladin deck are going to be good against the aggro decks. He's got a Skulking Geist in there, so he's trying to cover his bases there against Druid as well. But unfortunately, I think that may be an error. Well, we don't know this. He's clearly winning all right so far, but I think his approach is that he's going to cover his bases to be able to beat everything that comes up without realizing maybe that if you're opposing a very aggro lineup, that Rogue is going to have to beat one of those decks, and you only get so many chances to do that. It looks like Mochi's Acolyte of Pain has been devolved into a Twisted Worgen, which is not especially stellar against all the 1/1s on Blitz's side of the board, but does at least allow him to take out the Primal Fin Totem.
Now, if you're Blitz, how nervous are you coming into 4 mana on the Paladin and the possible
very nervous
creation?
And especially once you see that Mistress of Mixtures. Once you see the Mistress of Mixtures, you're like, oh no, my opponent is playing Control Paladin, and there are some board clears. And right now, Mochii is wide on the board. His Maelstrom Portal has just cleared out some opposing minions, given him a Grimskull Oracle, making his Primal Fin tokens pretty good. But he's got to be thinking in the back of his head, if there's not a Consecration, there's probably a Wild Pyromancer. My minions will not last long on the board, and I need to get as much value out of them as possible. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of these minions survive the turn, if Blitz wouldn't just next turn play Think from Below for 4 mana and then Evolve, just to try and get these minions bigger to survive any Consecrations that might be coming his way.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think it takes a special kind of skill with the Shaman deck to realize sometimes you're not just holding the Evolve for the Doppelgangster combination, but sometimes there are really appropriate times where you actually do need to trigger an Evolve to win games that might not have always been winnable.
That's right. We see Mochii bringing down the True Silver Champion and taking out the Grimscale that was buffing the other Murlocs, sorry. Looks like Blitz is just leaping straight in and taking the Bloodsail Corsair is taking out the rest of that True Silver Champion. Thing from Below for 4 mana, putting that on the board. I guess he's concluding at this point that Mochii does not have a Consecration. So, of course, the Bloodsail Corsair brought out Patches. He has a 5/5 with Taunt and a bunch of 1-attack minions that would die to a Consecration. Mochii is playing a Eldor Peacekeeper to neuter that 5/5 to a 1/5 and then hero powering. I think Mochii at this point is probably very worried about a thing, not a Thing from Below, a Bloodlust. We can see Blitz doesn't have one in hand, but I'd say things looking pretty dicey if he ever draws one off the top of his deck.
Yeah, and I feel like it's interesting here because Mochi's now going to find out that there is no Bloodlust in the hand, and I wonder how that's going to shape his decision-making moving forward in weighing the chances of one of the 2 Bloodlusts coming to Blitz's hand, as opposed to making the plays that he's trying to make. I mean, I imagine if the Eldor lives here, we might see a turn where there's Wild Pyromancer Blessing of Kings, perhaps, to deal with most of the board. But again, I think Blitz is wise in trading into the Eldor, especially because we're heading into Spike Ridge Steed territory as well. And if he does draw the Bloodlust, he does want to open himself up to be able to win the game. But it looks like he's maybe leaving Eldor on 1 health.
I can't think leaving it on 1 health is a great idea myself. He's got 2 minions left that could finish it off. There it is. He's traded away all of his 1/1s. As you say, that's Maybe he knows that a Wild Pyromancer and something like a Blessing of Kings would wipe out the 1 health minions, so he's traded them all away, leaving himself with at least 2 health on all of his minions. And he's also played a Monotide Totem, which is going to help him draw into a Bloodlust, hopefully. So he's still got 5 minions on board. Of course, most of them have 0 or 1 attack, but that's where Bloodlust shines. Mochii's played a Skulking Geist, which is actually pretty solid. It's taken out the Evolve that was in Blitz's hand and the Evolve left in his deck. Which means that Blitz is now going to depend on those Bloodlusts to finish off his opponent. He's played Ire Blackpaw, getting a 1/1 Jade Golem, and then just go on face, attacking Mochii to 15. I guess he's hoping that this Monotide Totem is going to draw him into Bloodlust, because failing that, Mochii's going to start trying to clear the board, and then we'll be stabilizing the game that way, knowing that there'll be no Doppelgangster Evolve combo.
Yeah, I mean, Mochii's at a really awkward crossroads here as to what he should do with his turn. I don't hate the Ivory Knight, especially because you might be looking for an equality, perhaps, to go with the Wild Pyromancer. The other options included Wild Pyromancer, Blessing of Kings, which I don't know if I particularly liked. Again, just some very awkward decisions that he's confronted with.
Yeah, it wasn't a terrific turn. I mean, the Ivory Knight at least puts a large minion on the board that will help contest all these little minions that Blitz is putting out. But every turn that Monotide Totem draws Blitz an additional card is a turn that gets him closer to Bloodlusts, assuming he's playing them. I think we're assuming he's playing them. It does put a sizable body on the board for Mochii, but I don't know, the clock is ticking. Mochii did take Silver Moon Portal off the Ivory Knight, giving him 4 health. But of course, that is a great spell to play on the Wild Pyromancer as well. How close are we? Yeah, we're still several turns away from 10 mana, where Mochii would be able to play Blessing of Kings and Silver Moon Portal on the Wild Pyromancer at the same time. But that would be a pretty good turn, because 2 damage across the board would wipe out most of what Mochii has.
And if you're Mochii, you're probably thanking your lucky stars that you're not dead at this point in the game. And you're probably thanking your lucky stars that Blitz, with his 6-7 minion board before, didn't pull the trigger on an Evolve before Skulking Geist came down. I mean, it was a very interesting game.
Yeah, I agree. Blitz is clearly trying to find a way to close out the game. He's trading with the Ivory Knight and hero powering and putting down a Galactic Crawler, but he's still facing a Skulking Geist, which is going to try and take out each of his minions. That thing from below, being a 1/5, is sort of holding off and protecting a lot of the smaller minions, which is quite useful. But yes, it's only a matter of time. Either Mochii finds something to finish the board carrier, whether that be a Consecration or an Equality, or Blitz draws a Bloodlust. That's what we're looking at. Of course, Mochii does have a Ragnaros Lightlord in hand, which he could use to heal himself up. But I think Blitz is putting on just enough of pressure here that it's not really letting him get away with it.
Yeah, I think playing the Wild Pyromancer here is just an acknowledgement of how much this 1/5 is making Mochii a little bit nervous, that he's just been unable to really attack through to the rest of the board. Legitimately seems like this is an attempt to just try and have the Doomsayer maybe absorb some damage, because it's never resolving, and just hoping that you're not copying that Bloodlust. The Monotide Totem has been down there for turns now. It's almost a little bit unlucky for Blitz to have not picked it up at this point. That being said, though, it looks like he actually just has lethal, so never mind that.
Yeah, I think the Doomsayer was probably just an attempt to try and distract Blitz. Blitz had lethal left on the board. The Silver Moon Portal on the Wild Pyromancer allowed the Skulking Geist to take out that 1/5 thing from below, but it had held off the Skulking Geist long enough, and the rest of the small minions were there to finish it off with help of a Jade Claws. Now, it's unfortunate for Mochii, but that's the way it has to go. Sometimes your control deck that's designed to beat the aggro deck still can't quite get there. Blitz just went wide and was rewarded.
I mean, it's pretty typical if you're talking about Hearthstone in a fundamental sense, right? You have an aggressive deck, and an aggressive deck plays lower cost minions and is usually pretty consistent in pushing out pressure as a strategy. Whereas if you play a control strategy, you need to draw specific tools that can counter the aggressive strategy. And you do have those occasions where you just don't find those tools that lower your opponent's ceiling enough, and you just outright lose to the aggro decks that pretty consistently do the same thing every game. So it's just the case there where we couldn't find a Consecration or an Equality, and that happens at times when you're playing control strategies.
I was going to show my age a bit here, but there's a quote from a long time ago pro Magic player called Dave Price, who was always a proponent of playing aggressive decks. He said there are no wrong questions, only wrong answers. And what he means by that is you put aggressive minions on the board and you start attacking face. They will get there, or they won't. And either your opponent has the answer or they don't. But every aggressive minion is the correct one. So it'll get there in the end if not answered.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely arguable that aggressive decks in a very, very overall generalized statement are more superior to control decks.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
So we're looking here at Mochii's Paladin deck again against Blitz's aggro tempo Paladin. Blitz led with a Firefly in turn 1. Mochii's just straight up just played a Doomsayer across from it. Now, the card that Blitz drew this turn with a coin in hand is a Plague Scientist. So if he wants, he can coin out the Plague Scientist, giving his Firefly poisonous, and just straight up attack into that Doomsayer and kill it. I'm pretty sure that's the play I would go with here, because anything else is just, letting the Doomsayer kill everything. So, yep, and it looks like that's what he's gone with. The rest of Blitz's stand, of course, is not spectacular if there happens to be a Consecration or anything in his future, but the Plague Scientist will survive the Consecration as well. So I like this setup. Funnily enough, Mochii does have a Consecration in hand this time, as well as an Equality, so he can technically clear any board that he wants to. As long as he can get that late.
Patches coming out here and the dagger up there. We just see some more pressure being applied here. I find it really interesting that, yes, we are moving into Consecration territory, but I don't think this is a particularly enticing Consecration point, seeing how valuable the card is to your overall strategy, which means that the Firefly persists there with Poisonous, which is, again, interesting because it puts Mochii in a really awkward spot. It's like, do I trigger the Consecration so I don't have Poisonous, dealing with basically any minion I play? Do I hold off? Do I charge Chillblade Champion into the 2/3 so that when I do eventually trigger Consecrate, I can deal with the entirety of the board as it stands? Now, that Poisonous play really asks a lot of questions of Mochii, which is why I like it in particular.
Yeah, me too. As you say, this is not a board that you're particularly thrilled about playing a Consecration into, but the Firefly is really making that point something that you need to consider. So I also really like that. The fact that the Plague Scientist is a 2/3 is what makes you question this as well, because it would survive the Consecration. We're seeing a Chillblade Champion coming down by the looks of it, so that answers that. What's interesting here is that traditionally a Tempo Rogue, you want it to have no minions on the board by the time it gets to turn 7. We saw Mr. Lego play the Shadow Step on Patches play just so that he could play Patches with 0 on turn 7 so he could Bone Merit. Unfortunately, the Swashbuckler has given Blitz a Blessing of Kings, so that turn is coming 3 turns earlier, and here comes the surprise +4/+4. Mochii, having taken out the Poisonous Firefly, is about to get I think hit quite hard by Patches wearing a Blessing of Kings. I think it's probably safe to say that Patches has been the king of this metagame for the last year and a half, so not surprised there. Mochii being attacked down to 21.
So again, Mochii snapping off the Eldor Peacekeeper there, keeping the Patches honest. Hero powering up there and has the option, obviously, of Equality Consecrate next turn or Equality Pyromancer Hero Power, so should he choose, and some reload with Ivory Knight into some heals. So these next 2-3 turns are absolutely going to dictate who wins this game. Absolutely crucial. See the backstab come out here alongside the Bittertide Hydra. Blitz building up a gigantic board. I imagine we'll see the Silverhand Recruit being killed off here. And I mean, short of having the Equality, the Bittertide Hydra would probably all but lock up Proceedings. Given that the Elder is already being played, but I imagine we have to see some form of Equality clear. Yeah, it's too much damage.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. It's like that Hydra would be huge if not for the fact that Mochii has an answer for it. And it looks like he's going with Wild Pyromancer and Equality. These few turns here, 5, 6, and 7, both players are just playing giant haymakers of plays. Like that Bittertide Hydra would close the game very quickly, especially given that the Bittertide Hydra was used on Patches. Not the Bittertide Hydra, sorry, the Eldor Peacekeeper. But of course, the Bittertide Hydra over the top makes the Eldor Peacekeeper play look foolish. But we're about to see what looks like a quality Pyromancer making the Hydra look foolish. Well, it's going to be interesting to see. The fact that Mochii can recover with not 1 but 2 Ivory Knights, I think, is going to be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on the efficacy of the Wild Pyromancer quality as opposed to using the Consecration, especially considering the second Consecration got picked up?
Yeah, I mean, I like Consecration in this matchup as a clear in general because there are a lot of things like Swashbucklers and Flame Elementals and Fireflies. So it's not as bad. You don't need to combo it as much. Unfortunately, what's happening for Mochii here is that he's having to play a minion this turn because Blitz daggered down his Silverhand Recruit, which means Blitz is going to his turn 7 with minions on the board, which just turns straight on the Bone Mares, and here they come. First, he's actually got both of them too, which doesn't help. First Bone Mare is buffing the Flame Elemental, and he's going face to attack Mochii to 18.
And,
so this is where
we'll have something to say about this.
Oh my gosh, he got a Spike Ridge Steed, very nice. So yes, Consecration is pretty good in this matchup, but not very good once Bone Mare comes down. But thankfully for Mochii, he does have a Spike Ridge Steed. Mind you, thankfully for Blitz, he still has a Vastbind Slayer sitting in hand as well. So Spike Ridge Steed buffed up the Ivory Knight, which is going to allow it to eat the 5/6 Flame Elemental. I think that's a great play because you don't want to just sit behind that Ivory Knight expecting it to live when you know that your opponent runs more Bone Mares and a Vastbind Slayer, both of which are in Blitz's hand.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And here we see the Vastbind Slayer coming down. We're going to see the Bone Mare trade nicely into the 2/6 with the dagger on the finish off there as well. So pretty clean for Blitz. Just getting rid of what's in the way and moving forward and hoping to soon close out the game with a lethal push. So good turn there for Blitz, and it'll be really interesting to see what Mochii does here with limited resources and a lot of different options.
So I think Mochii is probably going to hope that this his second Ivory Knight, if he plays it this turn, delivers him an equality so he can make use of these consecrations. But he may not be in a position to be able to afford to play the Ivory Knight this turn, especially if he's planning on taking a 2-mana card from it. I think he just needs to play the Ragnaros Lightlord he just drew, along with the Getaway Kodo he got from the Hydrologist last turn, so that at the very least, with one of those minions gets killed, he gets it back. Well, maybe it looks like he's just playing both consecrations. And that will at least clear his opponent's board. He does have to trade his Hydrologist into the Tire Creeper, but he's left his opponent without any minions. I mean, I guess you kind of wanted to leave your opponent without any minions a turn ago, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe picking up the Ragnaros Lightlord, having the Getaway Kodo pull there had a lot to do with that because you can stabilize a little bit health-wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that maybe talked Mochii into the decision. We see the South Sea Deckhand here into the Bone Mare refill. Again, the board's pretty strong already just off the back of that 8-mana push there. And again, Mochii keeps getting put in these very weird spots. And it's testament to the way Blitz is applying pressure and managing his resources, but also kind of the unconventional deck strategy of Mochii and how it matches up to the popular decks right now as well.
Absolutely. It looks like Mochi's just going to throw down the Ragnaros Lightlord, which feels pretty good when you have a Getaway Kodo in play, and it's going to heal him up to 18. But we can see that Blitz has already drawn the second Vastbind Slayer, so he's just going to be able to dispatch that Ragnaros Lightlord and keep pushing. What Mochi's going to need to do after this, he has an Ivory Knight in hand and a True Silver Champion and an Acolyte of Pain. He's going to need to find some way to continue stemming the bleeding here. It looks like an Edwin Van Cleef off the top is just going to keep piling up big minions. I'm not sure that I would be so keen to throw out the Edwin Van Cleef here, although I guess a 6/6 Edwin now is better than having any other Edwins later.
Yeah, I think Mochii has one Pyro, one Equality left. Would that be right?
That's right, yeah. So I think, as we said before, you're just going to say, let's put my opponent in a position to see whether they have an answer. Because if he has the answer, he has the answer, and that's unfortunate. But I think the odds are with Blitz here that his opponent won't necessarily have the answer. It looks like he's chosen not to play the Edwin Van Cleef or the SI7 agent on the grounds that if his opponent has the answer, he can then refill. Let's see what he's got on board. He's got 12, 13, he's got 15, 16 damage, which means even if Ragnaros Lightlord comes down and heals Mochii up to 14, it won't be enough. And I think Mochii has realized that and has played Ivory Knight, but unfortunately has seen 3 1-mana spells, and that is not going to be enough to heal Mochii out of this one.
Yeah, it seems like the ambulance is here to pick up Mochii on the back of this rogue domination. So, yeah, it looks like to be all but over. We have the humility here, but yeah, it's just enough to stem the bleeding there. So, well played by Blitz.
That's right. Funnily enough, there's a Happy Ghoul in Mochi's hand as well. So it looks like he is planning on gaining life often and getting those 3/3s out for free. Unfortunately, it was not enough.
That's a cute idea, actually, to be able to actually play some things that contest